Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody back, Alabama Care. Today we have Mrs. Shannon Dye of Carney Dye Attorneys here in Birmingham, Alabama. And today we're going to be talking about what exactly is an ethical will. And at this point, I'd like to hand it over. Mrs. Dye, if you would introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. My name's Shannon Dye, and I'm an attorney here in Birmingham with Carney Dye LLC. And we specialize in wills and trusts and estate planning. And yeah, we're just a kind of a small local practice here in Birmingham.
Now, you guys are growing. I saw in the newsletter you're adding another attorney to the team.
That's right. Yeah. So we have 4 attorneys total now. So we're growing a little bit.
Congratulations. It's awesome.
You. Thanks.
And today we're going to be talking about an ethical will. Now, many people have probably heard of a will. If you would introduce and kind of give a description of what is an ethical will.
Yeah, sure. So an ethical will is something that's kind of come down in history from Jewish tradition, where people would sort of write down kind of their, I don't know, proverbs, thoughts, things they want to pass on to the next generation about what's important to them, maybe their family history, because oftentimes that's the way that things were passed along, via an oral and then eventually a written tradition. So it kind of got started in that way, but it's a way of passing on what's important to you as an individual, what's important to your family, and things you might want your future generations to know.
I love that it's kind of a formal thing, because a lot of people may think, my kids just know how things are and what I want and my values and that stuff. But to be able to kind of document it through writing or oral or video allows for that to make sure that the proper message is being transferred or talked about, and also allows your family and loved ones to go back, whether that's a year later or 5 years later, if they're missing you, 20 years later, your great grandkids that you may have never met, to go back and kind of see what, you're talking about and your values there.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think it's kind of evidenced by the fact that, everybody's interested in their family tree now, and everybody's interested in kind of knowing, because we sort of lost touch with that, as part of our history. And so we're now kind of, I think, re-enveloping ourselves in that and kind of, getting to know our family history. And I think having something, whether it's written, spoken, recorded, whatever it is, that might be able to, you as an individual can put your personal seal on it, is a nice kind of personal way to pass that on. And I think to your point, a lot of us assume, whether you have children or you don't, that like our family members know what's important to us. We just somehow assume, without ever having had that conversation with them, maybe we just think, oftentimes we think people see more into us than what they actually do, I think. Maybe that's just the selfish side of us, like secretly, that they think more about what we're doing on a regular basis or see more into our lives than they actually do. And so I think this is a formal way to kind of pass that on, to make sure you are giving that information and passing it down for the future.
And it's never been easier.
Right?
I mean, I hate writing. I'll be the first to say that. I will probably never write a book. It takes me forever to write an email. Most of my communication in written form is through text. So you don't have to feel like you have to write a book. But now I do everything on video. And then all you do is hit record, and you can just talk.
Absolutely. And some people are better with that than they are with writing, like you said. And then, it really could be anything such as painting or a drawing. Something like that you feel like communicates. Maybe you're a very artistic person, and that's how you could communicate things that are important to you, that tells a story about your life. That could be an ethical will.
Speaking of paintings, the one behind you.
Oh, yes.
What's the story behind that?
So this is actually a participant at Studio by the Tracks. If you're familiar with them, they provide, although I think obviously they've been affected by COVID. I don't know if they've reopened, or they may have just reopened, but they provide, art lessons for people with autism. And they can come there, adults with autism, and they can come there and learn art, painting, drawing, sketching, engraving, all that kind of stuff. And it's located over in Irondale. So it's a really good organization.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I am going to reach out to them and see if we can
Yes,
kind of
and
get a
you can buy
broadcast.
art from them. So all the participants get a portion of the proceeds from the sale of all their art. So, portion goes to the studio and then a portion goes to the participant individually, which I think is great.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you can do like painting, and we're kind of plugging them right now, but it's really cool.
Unintentionally, but yes, they're great.
So you can do painting, and then it sounds like you can do a few other different types of arts there as well.
Yes, I think they try to use a couple different mediums and just kind of see what speaks to the participant and, what they're good at. So,
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm gonna have to
and
check
some of
that
the
out.
artists that have been going there for a while, I mean, they're really in demand. They have a live auction, about twice a year. They've been doing it online recently, and you've got to get there to get the pieces that you want because they go quickly.
Yeah, and they're not making any prints of them, so it's got to
That's
be
right.
it's the
That's
real
right.
one. Okay, let's dive back into ethical wills here. Now, some people will see ethical wills in the tagline for today's broadcast. And so they'll say, well, what's the difference between an ethical will and a will that I've generally come to understand? And if you could kind of give the difference between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. So a traditional will or a legal will, as we would call it, is, the process by which you legally say, okay, if something happens to me, who gets what, who gets my personal property, who gets my house, all that sort of stuff. And it's really formal and legalistic. And there's a lot of maybe language that everyday people that aren't lawyers don't understand, right? That kind of goes into that. And you're not really able to express anything about yourself other than just practically this goes here, this goes here, this goes here. Whereas an ethical will is more of a personalized way for you to kind of express your wishes for your family, for the future, your what's important to you, your morals, ethics, values, and you can do it in a non-contained way, and also in a way that son or daughter, brother or sister can understand. It doesn't have to be written in a particular way. You don't have to have a lawyer draw it up. It's just something that, as if you were writing almost like a letter to your future family or your current family, how you would say it to them so that they would understand. That's how it can be written.
Now, when you describe it like that, it makes me think that a traditional will kind of deals more with property and assets,
Right.
whether that's financial, houses, money, that kind of thing. And then an ethical will deals more, I imagine it's starting off kind of like a mission statement, if you were to do it a little bit more formal. Like, this is what I envision for the family. These are
Mm-hmm.
the values. And these things, they don't have to go, as you mentioned, through a lawyer. And they don't deal with necessarily the assets there, things that you might have to go through probate. This is not anything to do with an ethical will.
Right. That's right. That's right. So it deals with kind of just totally different things. And it's nothing that has to be formal or has to go through a court in any way.
Now, we can kind of understand why wills are important, especially if they're a family that may need a little extra help after you're gone in passing down some of that property and those assets to help them. Why is an ethical will important for a family that might have a disability?
It's a good question. I think one of the reasons that it could be important would be just for, communication. And when I say that, I mean being able to communicate not only what's important to that person who's writing the will, but what's important to that loved one, with disabilities, and what's important to know about them. If it's somebody that was disabled maybe a little bit later in life, what's something that they communicated to you before they became disabled that now they're not able to communicate now as a result of their disability. And so you may be the only one who has personal knowledge, depending on the age of that individual. They may not have any other living family members that knew them before. And so you're the one that's able to kind of pass on that knowledge of what their life was like before, what they enjoy doing, what they enjoy doing now. And maybe they just simply don't have the ability to communicate that.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you mentioned that, it makes me think of as our parents get older and our grandparents get older. If they kind of have dementia or
Right.
Alzheimer's, stuff like that.
Mhm.
Um, do you notice that a lot of people are doing that as they start to get older?
I do see, I think, especially now, people really wanting to pass along that information. I think maybe it tends to be older people that want to do it more. I think it's important for younger people to do it too, though, because they're going to bring two different perspectives to the table. Older people are going to kind of offer their perspective of, my wisdom through all the years I've lived and these sort of things. Of course, we don't know when we're going to die. None of us do. But for a younger person, you're going to have a different perspective of, these are my dreams and my thoughts, and maybe you're more into that sort of stage of your life. And I think those are important things to kind of pass on as well, because sometimes we lose sight of those things as we get older. And so
I do think some of the social media gets a bad rap. It's addictive, that kind of stuff. But one of the things that I do like about social media is if I post something, whether that's a picture or I'm with my family, I can always go back through my timeline and revisit that picture, whether it was a hockey tournament with family or hanging out by the pool. So being able to document these things almost makes me think, did you ever see that movie with Matt Damon when he gets lost at Mars and he's got to tinker around and find a way back and live in Mars for like a year or something like that?
No, I don't think I ever saw that, but
it's a great one. But part of the thing is he's vlogging to himself and just documenting. So I almost imagine it's, maybe once a quarter where you're just talking kind of to yourself about your dreams, which is always a good thing to do. What you wish for the family, what you wish for the future. Then you can go back through that over 5, 10, 20 years. And it would be cool to see that, how you progressed when you hit 80 years old.
Right. Yeah, no. And I think, that brings up a good point too, of just like documenting these things. I think especially now, it's easy to kind of forget that documenting things is important because you just assume it's saved somewhere, and maybe it is, but maybe it's not. I have all these photos on Amazon Photo and I assume they're going to be there forever, but are they really, and sort of just thinking about documenting those things and experiences. And you could even do a combination of things, where you have the photo timeline and then you have the written document. And then, some people, they talk about have even written a song, about something that under an experience or time in their lives that might have been important to them. And they kind of incorporate that like a slideshow, and I think there is something special about, and I don't know, I joke with my clients all the time. You might not be able to relate to this as much, Alex, but there's something about us Southern people being able to talk to somebody or hear from somebody from the grave, and like you see these movies and somebody's doing the video and they're talking about their will or whatever after they've died. And I think just what a special thing, assuming it's in a kind way, right? It's not played up like in the movies where they're saying something terrible, but it's done in a kind way. And you just kind of hang on to that for the rest of your life. And that offers a special memory going forward for your family. Which I think really, and it can heal wounds maybe that have been in the family too. As a practitioner, I see a lot of that for whatever reason. We all have wounds that we're coming to the table with in our families. And I think that can kind of help smooth over a lot of things or issues or waves that might be there going forward.
Yeah. I've heard it from the other perspective as well, as like, no matter what you do as a parent, you can be a great parent. Your kids are going to blame you for something growing up.
That's right. I know. I think daily about how am I messing up something today with my children.
They're always going to pick. I'm sure I picked a few things and my parents were great. When you say the song though, that's a really cool way to do that. And I think that I see that in my family a little bit, not necessarily through songs, but through recipes. I see my grandmother or my grandfather talking about how their parents cook things. And I can see that they light up when they're doing that and going back to that old recipe, handwritten down, and they really enjoy that. And so that ethical will could involve a number of things.
It could, absolutely. And I think there's something too, like you were saying, even if it was a book of old recipe cards, through the years, like maybe it was grandmothers and then it was mothers and now it's daughters and then it's being passed on. I think there's something that you're saying there in communicating what your ethics and your values are. Even just, family time is important. That's what that would say to me, is having family meals, dinners with our loved ones is important to us.
Yeah.
But even something small as that could be an ethical will.
My grandfather also did 2 huge books about this thick in folders that he would take pictures throughout his entire life. And then when he retired and he had some more time, he would write down what was happening during their life at that time and then gave it to his daughters, my mom and my aunt. And there was a little bit of a mixed reaction, actually. Some people in the family didn't want to open it up because, they felt like it wasn't the right time. But I think there'll be that time in the future when they're more open to that.
Right.
And it will always be there for him. And I'm grateful that he went through that. And they weren't for my eyes. So I had to ask permission to see, those. And, my mom was like, yeah, check it out. But I am very grateful that my grandfather did that, because when they are ready, or when anyone wants to go back and look at those, they'll be
Mhm.
there.
That's right. Yeah, no, that's great. I love that. Because we have, I mean, I think we've all got those old photo albums somewhere that, I know for me, I need to get with my grandmother to tell her, hey, help me identify these people, because after she's gone, I'm not going to know who they are anymore. And that's a good way to kind of pass on that family information too.
I heard something the other day that, and I think ethical wills, you can almost do small ethical wills. Doesn't have to be a very formative thing. Doesn't have to be an hour-long thing, but it can be as something as small as sending a video to your son or daughter or sister, brother, your parents, just letting them know how important they are to you, and that came
I
from.
know moms who write a letter each year, to their child, like on their birthday or whatever, and then they do a collection of that and give it to them, at some point.
That's a great idea. And
Yeah.
I heard that kids don't necessarily want to be told, I love you, as much as they want to be told, I value you.
Mhm.
I value your time. I value who you are.
Right.
I heard that on a TikTok, so I'm going to start using that. But when we speak of doing these ethical wills, is there a platform or a service that is kind of all encompassing that you come across that you would direct some clients to?
I mean, there's a few out there that give some guidance on drafting one. There's like ethicalwill.com is one that we've used or directed clients to in the past. We also have a workbook that we've just developed that we try to share with clients as well. I don't know about as far as storing them, like for example, if someone has created a platform specifically to store ethical wills, I'm not aware. I mean,
Yeah,
it
that's what I was
may
wondering.
very well exist, but I'm not aware of one.
And I think it would be cool to have a video sharing platform, because I like the video aspect of it, but it wouldn't be something that I would want to put on Facebook,
Right.
because it wasn't meant for everybody. But I would want it to just stay in the family. So to have something like that, there's got to be something. I'll look into
Oh,
that.
yes, I'm sure. I'm sure.
Uh, I am going to go ahead and share my screen here, because you mentioned that at Carney Dye, you guys have a workbook. And can you see my screen now?
I cannot. Oh, wait, now I can. Yes.
Okay, so for anybody that is not currently signed up to the Carney Dye newsletter, I highly recommend it. Carney Dye is here in Birmingham and have helped me through some changes in my family. And when I have questions about things like that, they send out. Now, Shannon, this is once a month, correct?
Yes. We try to, well, so we try to do a newsletter, I think every 2 weeks, but we have two different newsletters. So you can sign up for one or both of those. The Advocate is one that we have that's, basically specialized for people with special needs. And then we have our general newsletter that covers a little more of a general variety of topics.
Mm-hmm. So this one right here, you guys can see was sent out on July 30th and talks about an ethical will by yours truly, Shannon Dye, who we have on with us today, and is some of the basis for what we're talking about here. So I highly recommend going to carneydye. Is it org or .com? I cannot remember. .com
Yes,
and
yes.
signing up for those. And here you can see at the bottom of this email, or right at the bottom of this excerpt, is a click to the website where you can obtain a copy of the estate packages. And I've already gone and preloaded that. And I'd like to kind of ask a few questions, because when we talk about, let me stop the screen sharing for a second. When we talk about doing something new, sometimes it can be cumbersome. People say, oh, ethical will, it has the word will in there. Seems like a lot of work. Seems like I'm going to have to plan for it. I'm going to have to sit down. This is going to take months. But you guys break it down on your worksheet by just answering simple questions to get individuals started, which I love. Now you give an overview what we've been talking about here. And you guys can see in the workbook, but there is an introduction and a list of contents there. I'd like to ask, when people say, well, how should I start? How you guys came up with these questions?
Well, I think we kind of came up with them from a variety of sources, but I think we sort of tried to focus on it from a perspective of what is the information that we would want to pass on to our families, and maybe how do we dilute down to those small things? Because I think, like you said, it's easy to get overwhelmed in such a project, especially if you're not a particularly creative person, or you feel like I'm a busy person who's, I'm a caregiver for somebody, I have kids, I have work, I have all these things. And so kind of just trying to break it down to the very basics of what you might need to know to kind of get you jump started on that.
And I always have a question. I get mixed up, but what does virtue mean to you? Or what do you think virtue means here?
I mean, to me, I think, virtue has a particular meaning, like you said, for everybody. But I think, maybe I kind of look at it from a biblical perspective of like, what is a virtue? Is it kind of, I mean, I think people can look at it from a different perspective, but I think it's, truth, is a virtue, I think it could have a different meaning for different people.
Is hardworking a virtue?
I think it could be, yeah. Because it's kind of a difference between, okay, is it a virtue? Is it a value? Is it a, yes. I mean, I can understand those can be very confusing and overlapping, but I would say that's more of a virtue than a value. Yes.
Yeah. I had some family conversation, and we were doing kind of a mission statement for the family. And we went through probably 3 weeks just on, is this a virtue or a value?
Right. Yeah. It can be confusing. Yes.
And we took like this 2-page document and boiled it down to like 4 to 5 sentences. And in doing so, you have to get rid of all the unnecessary or redundant. And we would have conversations on 1 or 2 words for an hour.
Right.
So
Google Dictionary says it's a behavior showing high moral standards. So there you go.
Behavior showing. I like it. So you guys walk individuals through this as setting it up. So here are some virtues. What are 5 virtues that are most that you most value in life? And then I love this question. I never would have thought, what is your favorite place in the world? That's so cool. Because
I think it speaks to a lot of who you are as a person, right? Because you might be like, oh, I love Paris in spring, or I love, the country, or I love, just being in my house on the couch, curled up with my dog. I mean, I think that in and of itself speaks a lot about a person.
I agree. And as we go through this, it makes me think back to a broadcast that we did with Mrs. McInerney about when students will go into meet their teachers or go into a school for the first time. She kind of walks her children through this process where they can kind of hand that sheet over to the teacher and introduce themselves, or they have kind of a workbook that will go over, this is who I am, this is what is important to me kind of stuff. So I feel like this ethical will document could also be used for children.
Yeah, absolutely.
To help communicate with their parents. A follow-up question here is, who are your favorite people? I love it. Who do you like being around the most?
Yeah. And it's not meant to be a trick question of, something that would hurt someone or not, or a popularity contest, but really just, I mean, kind of who you enjoy being around. Are they, people that are like yourself? Are they people that are different than yourself? And I think that kind of speaks again to what's important to you. Is it family? Is it friends? Is it somebody other than that?
I'm answering these things as we go through it for myself, and I'm getting caught up. I'm like, I can't do that now. I have to print this out and do this after. And another question, who are your favorite artists? So questions like these will start to pull out for people that may not have, if you're a grandparent and your grandchildren are 3 or 4 years old, you might not be there when they're able to communicate and ask you these questions. So this, along with a well-documented will from attorneys, is a great way. I almost consider it like sandwiching the passing along to the next generation. You have a very professional will that takes care of the assets. Then you have an ethical will that sandwiches from the other side of who you are outside of those assets.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I think, Alex, one thing that I think comes up a lot with what I do is, part of what we're doing is passing on personal property. right? So all this, think about all the stuff in your house, right? And the things that you have and what you've saved and what you've ditched. And, the children or whoever walking into the situation going, well, why did so-and-so save this? Why is this important to them? Well, the ethical will can kind of communicate that. Why did they save this, piece of string from wherever? And it might have a story associated with it. And maybe that's a really cool story and you want to pass it on. And who knows, maybe that should be in a museum one day because it has such a great background history to it. But if you don't communicate that, nobody's going to know it.
Yeah, it is if you're giving something and you're not told that it's been in the family for 200 years and all the journeys it's had.
Yeah,
It just
it's
doesn't
going to
mean
go to a
it's
estate sale or it's going to go to, the trash. And that's going to be lost. And I do think that there's a level of tragedy to that, for something that's important or should be valued. But maybe it's not because the story just got lost.
So going through this makes me, I have an older family member, and she has declared, things throughout the house and her assets that she wants to go to certain family members. And I keep asking her, I say, you need to write this down because I am not going to remember it. There's no way that I'm going to remember from years in the future that this ring or this lamp, this couch, and that's been a little bit of a struggle for her. But what I could do is kind of go around the house with her and record it and then ask these questions. Why is this couch important to you? And kind of document that for the family for whenever that is at her passing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, maybe it was a couch where somebody really important sat and told her something, or she had coffee with them or whatever, you just don't know, but there could be a story there.
I feel like there's a story for every little item she has. This is going to be a month-long project. Very cool. Well, we're not going to do too long of a broadcast today, but I did want to touch on the ethical will because I think it's a great starting point. If you're thinking about wills in general or documentation and you're feeling overwhelmed, I think, and we're going to put the link to the workbook in the chat. I think starting out with that workbook and asking those questions and documenting those questions will help kickstart some of the other things that you may be a little overwhelmed with.
Absolutely. I agree. And yeah, please put a link to the workbook and, hopefully it's helpful to the viewers out there.
Yeah, it's been helpful to me already. As we come to a close here, is there anything that we haven't talked specifically about ethical wills that you think a family or individual could benefit from hearing, or anything going on at Carney Diet?
I think just mainly just knowing that it's okay for the ethical will to be a process. It doesn't have to be, I have to sit down and complete all of this in one day. I mean, even just looking at the workbook, I mean, our automatic tendency is to say, oh, I need to go through and answer all these questions today, and then I need to get it done. And I mean, I understand I operate that way too sometimes, of having a deadline is helpful to actually reaching the end of the goal. But I think too, part of it is just it being a process and just working through it. So I think just knowing it's okay if it takes some time, and, I think you'll get more out of it that way.
Mm-hmm. Print it out, maybe wait till your family gets in town and do it over Thanksgiving.
Yeah, absolutely.
Give everyone a piece of paper. Yeah.
That's right.
I'd like to thank Mrs. Dye for being here with us today. Once again, speaking on behalf of Carney Dye Attorneys, LLC, here in Birmingham, Alabama. And I'm going to go ahead and put the contact in the chat once again. We just appreciate you being with here and sharing with the community. I know sometimes we'll do shorter or longer broadcasts, but for being a resource for the community that we can reach out to when we have questions that are outside of our field. And a lot of the legal is outside of my field. And so thank you for being a resource for me and for the community to reach out to. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Happy to help.
Yeah. All right, Mrs. Dye, you have a great rest of your day.
All right. Thanks. You too.
All right. Bye.
Bye.